All right, well, we will stick up another conversation right now, and we're trying to talk about security. I think we had a story yesterday about security, especially in parts of the Northwest, where the value chain of insecurity has been a conversation we've been having, well, I think maybe a month or so, because if we're trying to look out of the box to see how we can stop this particular trend from continuing, then we have to be able to nip it in the bud. And that bud apparently is where the money is. So if we have a value chain that thrives on insecurity, where people are making a killing, making a massive amounts of money just from instability and the kidnapping and banditry situation, what out of the box thinking is going into stopping that? If you have an actual value chain from crime and criminality thriving, then what do you do to stop that? And we'll be having the conversation right now with an expert on security joining us via Zoom right now. I think we have Mr. Kabir Adamu joining us on the program. Good morning, Mr. Kabir Adamu.
Good morning, Kela. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. I mean, we've been talking about security for a very long time, and during the week, I think at some point I stay saying, look, it feels like we keep saying the same things over and over and over again. But we do have to move forward on some level. Let me get your thoughts on the value chain of insecurity and how that can be stopped.
Yeah, it's all about accountability, Kela. In the minimum, we have 29 ministries, departments, and agencies that have responsibility for security. Now, these 29 are divided into three layers: the strategic layer, the tactical layer, and then the operational layer. Now, for each of these layers, there is a level of responsibility, but sadly, over time, we're not holding them as accountable as we should be holding them. And part of the reason for this is the legacy of military rule that we've seen over time. I know the viewer would probably say, well, we've had over 20 years of democratic rule in this Fourth Republic. But frankly, not much has been done to change that mindset of non-accountability within the security system. I must commend the immediate past president and the current president, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, for attempting to introduce performance measurement within the security system. But it hasn't really taken effect. A lot needs to be done. And the role of the National Assembly too would need to be emphasized so that our security agencies, all those 29, would have to be accountable to us. They need to come back to us after every period, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, to tell us in clear terms with monitoring and evaluation tools to say this is what they've been able to achieve with the amount of money that we've been giving them. Right now, that is not happening, sadly, Kela. And I think this is the major problem, the fact that they are not accountable to us as a people. The second element is the environment that we found ourselves in. There are about 3 issues that are driving insecurity in Nigeria at the moment. The socioeconomic conditions. Yeah. Everybody feels it. A bag of rice now is going for more than 100,000 naira in most parts of Nigeria. And then, of course, the other components, power, name them. Just this morning, I heard that MPA has increased its tariff for, so virtually everything, that socioeconomic circumstances that is having a pinch is predisposing a lot of people to criminality, sadly. The second point is the environmental issues, climate change, and our inability as a country to mitigate the consequences of this climate change. And then the last one is the political circumstances or development. And this internal as well as external. If I speak internal, it's the grievances, our inability as a country to have inclusivity. Anyone who has read Why Nation Collapsed would remember that he spoke about institutions, the ability of institutions to provide inclusion. We've not done that very well within the Nigerian system. The second part is the external part. I can speak about that developments in Sahel. What we're doing right now with Trump. He just, as it were, showed how vulnerable our health system is just by, impacting on USAID, and all of a sudden we're, reacting in a manner. So all of these are part of the reason. Of course, I would not conclude that question by not talking about our role as Nigerians. How much are we supporting the security paradigm? Do we understand our role? Do we see and talk security? Do we support? Do we prevent certain things from happening? Unfortunately, not as much as we should do as citizens. So these are some of the reasons why we've not seen much improvement in this security, despite the huge sums that are being devoted to security. Just yesterday, we saw a retired general being abducted in Katsina. In Sokoto State, people were praying in the mosque. They were attacked. I think about 20 or thereabout of them were abducted. There's no part of the country that is not impacted, unfortunately, at the moment.
And when we saw that story about the NYSC DG that was kidnapped yesterday, such a worrying situation because of how high-ranking he is in the military and how this could just happen. But, you know, it's almost getting to a point, Kabir, where it feels like it's becoming normal, and we cannot accept this bizarreness to become our norm, you know. And I want to be able to get your thoughts on something I saw, because Beacon Security, which is the agency that you head, you do monthly reports. At least I'm privy to some of your reports from time to time. And one of the things that I heard you say recently is that our security agencies are ill-equipped, those were your words, ill-equipped to handle modern security threats. Could you expand on that? And when you say modern security threats, is there a new dynamic to insecurity that we're probably not looking at?
A lot, Keller. Cybersecurity is one of them. And as a country, we need to study in a very dispassionate manner the dynamic around cybersecurity. There are lots of theories going around at the moment. Interpol recently worked with Nigeria, and about 30 youths thereabout were arrested with, you know, mind-boggling circumstances around the operation and the revelation of that operation. So how much of our security architecture is involved in understanding modern-day cyberspace? Not just the open web, even the dark web, as it were, where a lot of illicit activities is ongoing. The variance, as it were, between our capability on cybersecurity, and this is going to two major agencies in government, the Office of the National Security Advisor and then the Minister for Communications, is how much of a handshake are we seeing between those two? The language and the body disposition I'm hearing is that communication is, of course, it's communication. It can't be in security. But in modern day, there has to be a handshake. The divergence between physical security and cyber security is so thin at the moment. And I always like to give this example. You're a security professional. You've been asked to go to, let's say, Transcorp Hotel to do an assessment, and you complete your assessment, you give everything a pass mark, but you forgot to take cybersecurity into consideration, and your principal, who is your president, who is visiting, now goes into a lift, and then one young boy who is 12 years old from somewhere in Delta State decides to hack into that lift and hijack the lift while your president is inside. You would have failed woefully in your job. So this is this convergence between cyber and physical security that as a country, we are yet to take hold of and bring the two sides together. The response I will get from most public security managers is that, well, a new unit has been created in the Office of the National Security Advisor that is responsible for cybercrime. But that is just one component. Cybercrime is just a very small component of what the cyberspace represents in modern day national security. So that is one. Another example I'll give you is the recent adoption of improvised explosive devices that are being used by terrorists. I know the military has laughed it off, but it's not something we should laugh off. It is a new methodology. They are deploying drones to deploy IEDs. And our capacity as a country to manage that is limited. Which now brings us to the question, how well are we prepared to mitigate this new risk? Yes, you can laugh it off, but then it is a risk, and it is a risk that is worrisome and that we should take control of. At the moment, we're seeing it in the Northeast. We're hoping that we quickly adopt mitigation measures, and these mitigation measures, it shouldn't just be responsive. First off, how do they access the drones, the unmanned aerial vehicles? How are they able to entrap IEDs on those drones? How are they able to power them for them to move from point A to point B? These are all questions that we need to as a country. But even more importantly, Kela, is the materials that they are using for putting together the IEDs. If you had gone through our report, we highlighted the fact that it is concerning that we're seeing in places like Zamfara State, road-planted IEDs. In Niger State, in Shiruru in particular, the government issued an alert to the residents of Shiruru, warning them to stop plying certain routes because of road-planted IEDs. What are we doing as a country to prevent access of this? In the past administration, a committee existed in the Office of the National Security Advisor that was monitoring the movement of incendiary materials. I'm not sure that committee is still in existence. If farmers, miners are able to access those materials, and we're seeing the type of detonations and explosions that we saw in the month of December and January 2025, what are we waiting for? At what point are we going to realize that we need to take? So technology can come in to help us to analyze, to understand, to gather information regarding these things. Because first off, we're short-staffed in terms of the number of persons that all these security organizations need. So technology is the force multiplier. It's not just a force multiplier. It can help the human mind in terms of understanding these issues that are at play. Of course, it can also be a deterrent element. If there are so many components of that deterrence element, the ability to detect, the ability to gather evidence so that the offending party is prosecuted, technology can help in that regard. So there are so many applications. I've not spoken about AI. AI can be a force multiplier. We can't run away from AI. The moment. The criminals are using AI at the moment to model their own operations. They can create a simulation of an attack and then perfect it and then carry it out in the physical world. What are we doing as a country to now model our mitigation measures, anticipate what these criminals can do, and then deploy it? So, Kela, I can speak about technology from today till tomorrow on how it can support and help our national security, and not just national security, but both corporate security as well as our individual security for day-to-day activities.
I mean, since we're talking about cybersecurity, I want to be able to get your thoughts on this international perspective that we're looking at. I think it's a conversation that I don't quite understand. I spoke recently with someone who was in cybersecurity, and the person said, look, this dynamic is one that we really need to understand and handle properly. And I'm referring to the fact that, and we saw that in some of our visuals, where you hear about training schools for people who will be committing all kinds of cyber crimes, and we saw some in Abuja here. And then when the parade of suspects is done, and whatever people may think about parades of suspects is a topic for another day, but when that parade is done, we now start to see a lot of foreign nationals among the people being paraded. And it just got me wondering. I mean, our Wi-Fi is not exactly the best here. Why would I leave China or Malaysia, where there's Wi-Fi everywhere and the internet access is like this, to come to Nigeria to perpetrate all kinds of crimes? And I think they even brought up the issue of that particular crime, something that had to do with a hotel scam, something that's been operated here and used to defraud people from around the world. I want to get your thoughts on how we're handling cyber crime in Nigeria and these parades of suspects and these international elements and the amount of young people, as we can see on our screens, who are being trained, in quote, according to the EFCC, in cyber crime.
So I believe that the eco space for cybercrime in Nigeria, from a mitigation point of view, we've not even started scratching the surface to understand the extent and the depth of cybercrime in Nigeria. It's a whole range of activities, starting from the issuance of visas, I'm sure you've discussed extensively several programs on border security, but how much of border security is embedded into the issuance of visa? How well do we understand that it starts from there? I know the current Minister of Interior, with, of course, the Minister of the Immigration Service, has done quite well. But then the eco space is siloed. You see different elements. There is nobody bringing those elements together. different nationalities. I don't want to mention any nationality, but I think anyone who saw that video that you showed earlier on would have seen what nationality it is. They collect visas. They come to Nigeria. They engage in different crimes. The one we're discussing at the moment is cybercrime. But what of mining? It is also another one that is concerning. So they come in with visas that are meant for certain purposes, but then they end up engaging in those services that are detrimental to our national security, to our economy, to virtually everything that we stand for as a nation, and yet we don't do anything about it. And this is because of the siloed nature of our approach to national security. When we discuss those visas, what of the issuance of the licenses? There are several organizations that provide service providers that provide internet. Under what grounds do they sign those contracts with them? For every contract you sign, there is a clause there that says you can't engage in criminal activities. Yes, they engage in those activities with impunity, and they are not supported. So again, the eco space for cybercrime is so wide. And I must say, as a country, we've not even started scratching on the surface to delimit. Just yesterday, like I mentioned, Interpol arrested about 30 or announced the arresting. The arresting took place a little bit earlier, but it was announced just yesterday. So to that extent, I think we've not done well in terms of scratching the surface of these issues. We need to do better. We need to do more. I talked earlier on about a handshake between perhaps the Office of National Security Advisor and the Minister of Communications, who kind of resides over the infrastructure for cyberspace in the country. That mindset that one is security while the other one is not security, I think we need to move ahead of that. The National Assembly can play a role in supporting that handshake so that we see more collaboration between the two sides.
I want to be able to get your thoughts on how the Tinubu administration is handling security, and I'll explain why. There was a CDS event, the Chief of Defense Staff had some event, and it was about the different theaters of war that we have in the country, an opportunity for them to express themselves, and all the people who are a part of that, these theaters of war, able to say these are the challenges that we're facing and this is how we're doing. Well, the Minister of Defense, Mohammed Badru, he represented President Tinubu at this event and actually gave kudos to the military, saying you're doing a great job. In many ways, Kabir, it does feel like our military, our security agencies, they do what they can. But as me and you have discussed before, there's the non-kinetic bit of this conversation that in many ways is being ignored. And I think you alluded to that in the beginning of our conversation today. As long as we keep our boots on the ground, they will be doing what they can. But as long as poverty is endemic and these other non-kinetic issues are not being handled, we're going to take one step forward and two steps backwards. In your view, how is the Tinubu administration addressing insecurity in this country? He says it's up on his agenda, the president says this. He says this is something that we're very committed to. The bulk of our budget goes there. There's always something going on that we're trying to make sure that our military is doing what they can. Is he getting it right? And are there areas that he can improve on before the end of the year?
Yes, I must say that with all sense of responsibility, that I believe that the president has security at the top of his agenda. And the reason why I'm saying that is if you had picked the Renewed Hope agenda, security featured prominently. And of course, since it's a mandate, that agenda led to the mandate that we've given to him. He has consistently showed that security is at the top of his agenda. Anyone who doubts that should look at the 2025 budget. In fact, first the 2024 budget and then the 2025 budget, where security occupies the single highest provision, as it were, for any sector, more than health, more than education, more than any other sector, infrastructure. But the challenge is this, Keller. The agenda is there in the Renewed Hope agenda. We've given him the mandate. He's made about 8 promises within that agenda, the Renewed Hope agenda. But how much of those promises have been fulfilled? Almost 2 years into the administration. Unfortunately, not so much. He's appointed several persons, but I believe that those persons, for certain reasons, maybe political reasons, are delaying the implementation of those 8-point agenda in the Renewed Hope document that the president used and that we gave him a mandate. So, I love M&E, monitoring and evaluation. If you have a document, a tool You can develop KPIs, key performance indicators. You can measure. I'm saying this dispassionately. There are 8 points in that. I can tell you with all sense of responsibility that not more than 2 of those 8-point documents have been implemented. And so 2 out of 8, I don't think it's a pass mark. And with all sense of responsibility, I would urge Mr. President to look back at what he promised. I mean, police reform is one of the promises in that 2 years down the road, we've not made progress in that regard. What we're seeing is a cyclical arrangement that is exasperating. We need to see progress in that regard. The talk shop that has been ongoing should stop. People are dying. In Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited, we documented over 11,000 deaths in 2024. That's worrisome. I know the president is a father. He has a heart. He listens. And that message needs to be sent across to him. When his managers go to tell him that only 200 people died in Nigeria, that's a blatant false documentation. 11,000 people died. The president needs to know that. So which takes me to the next point. I believe that in addition to what the president has, he needs somebody within the villa that would serve as an accountability tool to be advising him in terms of coordination in particular. Earlier on, I spoke about the 3 levels of security, the strategic, the tactical, and the operation. The entire levels are jumbled up now. Those that should be responsible for strategic are involved in tactical and are involved in operation. So who is doing the coordination? I believe the president should have somebody around him in the villa who should be advising him on these 3 levels. Perhaps help him with a dashboard that he sees these 3 things: strategic with the 8-point agenda, with key indicators telling him the levels of performance, then tactical, also see where he sees progress, and then of course operational, where he sees progress. Beyond that, I also feel that the president needs to appoint someone who should be responsible for policing the security agencies. So an ombudsman, as an example, a lot of what the challenges we have, why we are yet to achieve the so-called all of government and all of the citizens' approach to security is because of the alleged human rights abuses by police, by security departments. So the president perhaps should, as provided for in our laws, appoint an ombudsman within the security sector that looks at the security, looks at defense, look at intelligence, and advise him appropriately on achievement within the human right space in terms of abuses with regards to that. And then lastly, I think the president also needs to speak a little bit more to Nigerians on security from time to time. It's not just about devoting money, but it's also about accountability, telling Nigerians this is the progress, acknowledging. I mean, the president traveled at the time when certain persons died. I don't think this is acceptable in most democracies.
Oh, yeah.
So that type of feedback, that type of engagement with citizens would also help the administration going forward. But on the whole, yes. I don't doubt his commitment. His commitment is clear, and I've demonstrated how. What is lacking is accountability within the security sector. And I've given elements on how the president can improve.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you very much, Mr. Kabir Adamu, MD of Beacon Security, for being with us on the program and for all of your insights. And I'm pretty sure someone is listening. Let's see how much of what you said will be implemented in the days and months ahead. But I want to thank you for making out the time to be with us on Sunrise Daily.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.